folks, I'm still here with Martin Austwick, aka Oz, from the English Martial Arts Academy, based in Surrey, in England. And I want to ask a little bit about old pugilism and boxing versus modern boxing. So, as a sort of overview, what are the main differences technically? Not in terms of how it's promoted and and the clothes and all that kind of stuff, but what are the difference technically between what they did in older styles of boxing and what they do now?
Okay, well we can separate the differences into two main categories, if you like. The first and the most obvious is equipment. In modern boxing, people wear boxing gloves, large 16-ounce padded gloves. You have wrist wraps, hand wraps underneath to protect your wrist when you're punching, and these simply weren't used in pugilism. In fact, you could almost argue that the definition for pugilism is boxing that predates the introduction of gloves. And gloves do change the game in a significant way. The other significant difference is the rule set. In pugilism, grappling and throwing was allowed, other strikes were allowed, so elbow strikes, knees, that kind of thing were all perfectly acceptable, whereas in modern boxing, I hesitate to say these things aren't done, but you have to be a little more surreptitious about getting away with them in a modern boxing ring. So yeah, those are the main differences.
So presumably the wearing of gloves, as well as it protecting your hands, adds a bit of weight to your hands as well. Does it change the way that the punch is thrown?
Well, absolutely. Well, it should change the way the punch is thrown. Right. I mean, gloves give you a little bit more freedom. The hand's a very fragile thing. And if you start using it as a club to bludgeon other people with, you're going to damage the hand as much as you're going to damage the other person. So you've got to be very precise if you're using bare knuckle strikes. And you don't have to be anywhere near as precise when you've got some form of hand protection on. So strikes were very different. In pugilism, we're looking much more at long, straight strikes coming in a straight line, as opposed to hooks and large swans. But you can see straight away that I'm contacting here with a straight, and as this comes round, I'm contacting over here at an angle through the bone. And what that does is obviously it changes the forces somewhat. If I've got hand protection, that doesn't necessarily cause me a problem. If I haven't, it does. If I hit you and break my knuckles, I'm going to struggle to hit you again. And if I haven't then knocked you out, then so be it.
It's funny, coming from a swordsmanship background, some of the things I read in sabre and single stick manuals have a parallel there, in that one of the criticisms of single stick was that it was a round rod that you could beat someone with in any which way, and it didn't matter whether you hit with the edge or the flat, because there was no edge or flat. And you know, people like Hutton promote the use of steel practice sabres because they've got an edge and you have to strike correctly. And in a way, I suppose the boxing glove turns your hand into a ball, a giant ball, that you can essentially bludgeon the other person with, whereas actually a hand is a much smaller, more precise object that you maybe want to be more targeted with. I mean, I know that from personal experience of seeing people who've got into fights and so on, that it's relatively common for people to break fingers or break bits of their hand when punching someone else in the head. Were head shots less common in old?
Well, to a degree, yes. I mean, just to revisit what you said, I worked in orthopaedics for a little while, and a fracture of the fifth metacarpal at this end here is known as a boxer's fracture. It's that common. As soon as somebody walks into accident and emergency, ER, they've got a break here, you know they hit something, and it's as simple as that. So yeah, you've got to be very careful about where you hit. The face is still a valid target. It's known as the button. Essentially, we draw a circle about here, and that's where we can strike. But you're much less likely to knock somebody out with that. Fights went on a long time. People were dripping in blood from facial wounds. To actually knock somebody out with a punch is very rare indeed. A chap called Molyneux did it. He was. In my opinion, he was robbed of the championship. He should have won it, but he was both black and American, either one of which would have been enough to prevent him from being allowed to win it, but he did knock the great Tom Cribb out in a fight. By the time the furore had settled down, Cribb had come round and carried on fighting.
Right. Was this in the 19th?
No, this was way back, around, I'd guess, early 1800s.
Oh, okay.
So an awfully long time ago. And to put it into context, Molyneux originally was a slave.
Right.
And he won his freedom by being very, very good at boxing. He won his master several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and managed to win his freedom.
Cool. That's good stuff. So also related to that, presumably there were proportionately more blows at the arms, the body.
Well, absolutely, yeah. The main target area is known as the mark. Today we call it the solar plexus. A point here, you hit it hard, somebody's going to fall over. In general, in pugilism, the goal is when somebody hits the floor, that's the end of the round, and you then have 30 seconds to be able to come up to either a chalk line or a scratch in the ground. If in that 30 seconds you're unable to come to scratch, then you've lost the fight.
Right.
So you're much more likely to cause that to happen by winding somebody, or by breaking a rib, or by having them land so heavily when you've thrown them that they're simply unable to get up quickly. So that was a much more common way of winning a fight. Which of course leads us on to one of the other significant differences between boxing and pugilism, the grappling. When you see boxers fighting, they tend to throw punches with a horizontal fist, whereas in pugilism we look very much at a vertical fist. And one of the main differences for that, other than the precision that we've already looked at, is the position of the elbow. Whenever you do any wrestling, the first thing your wrestling coach will tell you, keep your elbows in. As soon as you stick an elbow out, the other person can get inside and grapple and throw you to the ground. If you throw a punch with a vertical fist, you can't stick your elbow out.
Right.
So it keeps you a little bit safer, it keeps your ribs covered, and it allows you to bar the mark so that you're not getting struck as well. Obviously this reduces the options available to you for striking, but it does mean that you're a lot safer when you do.
Cool. And last question. Famously, for anybody who's watched Sherlock Holmes films or films set in the 19th century or the Napoleonic period, when someone's doing an impression of an 18th or 19th century pugilist, they usually jump around a lot and they hold their fists out like this. Does that have any bearing on reality? And if it does, or if the reality is different to modern boxing, why is the sort of the guard position, or the sort of standard position that you start in, why is it different to modern boxing, however that might be?
Okay.
Presumably the gloves.
Well, the gloves play a major part in this.
Yeah.
The fact is, if I've got a large glove on, it's going to cause an area of blindness.
Yeah.
So I want to bring those in, I want to keep them fairly close. I can use those to protect myself against strikes.
It's like a shield, basically.
To a degree, absolutely, yeah. If I've put them out here, then I'm effectively blinding areas of myself. So you don't want to necessarily do that with gloves.
Yeah.
You can get away with it a little more with pugilism. But that being said, the hands are a valid target. If you put a hand out, there's nothing to stop me from hitting your hand and hopefully damaging your hand, stopping you from fighting. But that's one of the reasons you see people moving their hands around. This milling action is a way of stopping you from... Absolutely.
Right, okay.
And it also means that those areas that you're going to be targeting aren't left uncovered. I'm not leaving an area of myself completely uncovered. It's a massive exaggeration, of course. You look at some of the early prints, you'll see someone like Mendoza fights in a position much like that.
Quite curled up.
So it's low, it's curled, the hands are in, they're not blocking my vision. I've pulled my hands way back so that you can't hit them, but I've still got this field of vision. I've covered all the areas I want to cover. I've covered the mark, I've covered the floating ribs. Yeah, my face is clear, but you've got to get in quite a long way to do that, and that gives me a bit of time to react.
I know that in the early 19th century, boxing was sometimes described as the art of self-defence. In other words, the art of protecting yourself. If you were the honest, unarmed man, and sometimes attacked maybe someone with a knife or a stick, or just a ruffian wanting to mug you of your money, do you think maybe having the hands further out is part of that as well? Keeping someone further away? Or?
To a degree, almost certainly, yes. But I see that description very much as marketing, if I'm being completely honest with you. Yeah. A boxing career, a pugilistic career, was a very short-lived thing. And you've got to make some money somehow after that. The traditional thing was boxers became publicans. But some people did go on to teach self-defence afterwards. The gentry aren't interested in learning how to get into a ring and pugilise, but they are interested in keeping themselves safe. So there's a huge market for that. people like Bill Richmond was one of the first people to do it. He again was a black American boxer who did very well and set up a school that was very successful in London. Broughton did, Fig did, Jackson, some of these great names went on to teach self-defense to the great and the good of the country. But in the same way that whatever martial art you study now, if you look at karate, if you look at Tai Chi, the whole lot, whichever it is, they all tell you it's great for self-defense.
Yeah.
And boxing's no different. Pugilism was no different. They've got to sell it to you somehow, and that's a good way to do it.
And finally, I guess the transition from the various different rule sets of old boxing into what we now know as modern boxing happened in the late 19th century with Queensberry rules?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, Broughton's rules were introduced in 1843 and they lasted about 95 years. The London prize ring rules didn't last very long at all. So yeah, in the 19th century, the Marquis of Queensberry ruined it all for everyone.
So it's stratified down into the modern sport that we know by the end of the 19th century.
Absolutely.
And bigger gloves, I think.
The Marquis of Queensberry was the first person to bring gloves into the actual fight.
Right.
Before that, you'd fight bare knuckle, but you'd train in gloves.
Right.
He was the first person to introduce timed rounds.
Yeah.
Before that, a round finished when one of you hit the floor. Yeah. Things like that. So he essentially created the modern art of boxing as we know it.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, much the same way as that the swordsmanship that we practice evolved into fencing, pugilism evolved into boxing over the years. We can look at the major changes in the rule set and the practice, but there were subtle changes going on all the time.
That's brilliant. So just to conclude, boxing is part of Western martial heritage and goes back way into at least the 18th century and probably a lot further, just in Britain, and of course there are other styles of punching art. We know that in Renaissance Italy there was a style of pugilism, for example, you know, this is another aspect of HEMA or European martial arts that is documented and can be studied, and some people like Oz and other people and other groups around the world are reviving some of these older styles and looking into how these things used to be done, rather than just looking at modern boxing or modern fencing, but looking at the old styles as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.